Nobody seems to know for sure where Cablegate may lead. As media speculates on the future of the WikiLeaks case, I thought it would be appropriate to ask the opinion of an attorney with experience in dealing with complex international affairs. I'm speaking with Senior Principal Attorney of McNabb Associates, Douglas McNabb of PC Attorneys at Law. According to their website, www.mcnabbassociates.com, their firm offers over 30 years of international legal experience in dealing with issues such as Interpol litigation, international extradition, and OFAC SDNs. By anyone's standards, their firm is an authority on the issue of global criminal defense. If it can be proven that the claims against Mr. Assange were falsified, how might that affect the case against Mr. Assange in the United States?
What is taking place with regard to an investigation of Mr. Assange in the U.S. has absolutely nothing to do with the allegations of sexual misconduct out of Sweden. Two completely different issues. And so whether Mr. Assange was found guilty or not guilty, or Sweden elected not to bring any charges against Mr. Assange at all, I don't see that that's going to have any effect one way or the other with regard to whether charges are brought by the U.S. government against Mr. Assange or not.
Considering that Mr. Assange is currently in the United Kingdom, why isn't it possible for the United States, if in fact the objective is to remove him to the United States, to simply do so from the UK?
Well, the U.S. certainly could lodge extradition proceedings against Mr. Assange while he's in the UK. And I would submit that it would be easier for the U.S. To get Mr. Assange from the UK than it would from Sweden. But Sweden acted first, and as a result, Mr. Assange is in extradition proceedings. That matter is going to have to be addressed first. Hypothetically, if at some point UK denies extradition of Mr. Assange to Sweden, then Mr. Assange, if you will, is open game. If the U.S. government indicts Mr. Assange for having committed a federal crime, could then seek to have Mr. Assange placed yet again based upon the U.S. charges and seek to have Mr. Assange extradited from the UK to the U.S. But the Swedish matter is going to have to be addressed first.
Will the U.S. extradite members of WikiLeaks? How would we know if it's happening?
If the United States government believes that an individual has violated a federal criminal statute, then they're going to seek to indict that individual. Now, what is particularly interesting here is that the U.S. government, from a political perspective, I think, is going to have certainly their input as to whether Mr. Assange should be charged or not. But it is my view that if the U.S. prosecutors out of the Eastern District of Virginia in Alexandria have come to the conclusion that Mr. Assange and others have violated a federal criminal statute, the argument is going to be made by the prosecutors in Virginia that these individuals should be charged and extradition should be lodged. Now, the Attorney General is going to have to sign off on this, I'm sure. And I would suspect seek advice and counsel from those in the executive branch, whether the president or part of his advisors, as to whether this is something that should be done or not. This isn't your typical federal criminal case because of the media and the publicity and the political aspects of all of this and how it relates to the Constitution, the First Amendment, and the New York Times.
Mr. McNabb, what do you think of WikiLeaks' defense? Lastly, is this case comparable to other cases you've analyzed?
I think Mr. Assange, as I alluded to earlier, Mr. Assange and his lawyers have done an excellent job from a defense perspective in bringing all of these matters to the attention of the world. Who hasn't heard of Mr. Assange? Who hasn't heard of WikiLeaks? And we do know, if I may speak frankly, that the political process, while it shouldn't have any impact at all on an extradition proceeding, does come into play. We have seen that with regard to the Viktor Bout case, the alleged arms merchant that was in extradition proceedings in Thailand based upon 2 federal criminal indictments out of the U.S. We have seen in those cables that were provided to the different news organizations that the U.S. government put a full court press on the political process in Thailand, seeking to have Mr. Bout extradited from Thailand to the U.S. And just my instincts, and my instincts aren't perfect, but they're pretty good, I would suspect that the U.S. government very much wants to have Mr. Assange indicted and to stand trial in the U.S. And I think that's just a matter of time, in my view.
Well, sir, with that, thank you for your time. This was Christopher Michael Chiovich of ChristopherC.net speaking with Senior Principal Attorney of McNabb Associates, Mr. Douglas McNabb. His legal counsel and information on the subject can be obtained from his website, www.mcnabbassociates.com. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much.
This concludes our 4-part series on WikiLeaks. Please stay tuned for our next series with Attorney Douglas McNabb on the trial of Viktor Bout.